Good morning on this Tuesday morning. Yes, I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take for Market Rebellion, and it's another wild ride. Yesterday, we had the markets that were just basically moving to the downside, having a hard time finding any footing. And specifically, it was the Dow. The Dow was down throughout the entire session, it felt, and down about 330 points is where we finished up the day, kind of near those lows of the day. Meanwhile, you look over at the NASDAQ, the percentage loss was about half of what we'd gotten from a percentage loss from the Dow. And that definitely is something a little bit unusual. We were only down about 65 points for the NASDAQ. So you could see a little bit of that disparity yesterday, but still both in negative territory, along with the S&P, of course. You had crude oil starting off the day somewhere near that $80 level, kind of shrunk back down towards 77. But what everybody was really looking at yesterday was the 2-year. They were looking at the 10-year, the 2-year, sitting there at a 4.34. You look over at the 10-year, it was sitting very close and holding near that 3.9 area. And that was something that I think is definitely spooking the markets to some degree. You've got volatility in the 31s. You got the volatility index of the NASDAQ also higher and much higher. So middle 30s, upper 30s, that definitely stood out. And we did have a lot of participation yesterday in the derivatives markets, the volume again. And we have had day after day after day of extreme volumes of late. Matter of fact, 43.2 million contracts. We were over 60 million the other day. Just gives you a little bit of an idea of how wild but a lot of the participation that we are seeing within the market. So yesterday, it really was a lot of different sectors all getting hammered, energy being the leader all the way down almost, a little bit more than 2.5% yesterday. It was led by names like Devon Energy. That was down more than 4%. You have EOG, you've got Marathon Oil, all of those. You're looking at some of those beta names there. Obviously, the big names getting carried down as well. You had the financials down just under about that 2% range. Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, all the usual suspects under some very, very heavy selling pressure. We also had materials. And once again, more than a 1.5% drop there. Valet being one of those that really stood out, but also Cliffs, and you throw in a couple other names, U.S. Steel as well, contributing to that push to the downside. Healthcare also down, but not nearly as bad, about 1%. Not terrible, but names like Merck and Bristol Myers definitely in the red yesterday. And then there were the semiconductors. And I point that out because we've been watching the semis. A lot of people try to keep track of what's going on there. You saw a pretty accelerated move to the downside from NVIDIA as well as AMD. What wasn't going down and what held on to a lot of the gains throughout the day, that was Wynn, that was Las Vegas Sands, that was anything that has that Macau type exposure, because of the fact that it looks like everything is starting to become a big green light there and a big nice move to the upside, about 11 or 12% to the upside yesterday. That wasn't the only area. There was also that specific area of Costco, and throw in Walmart, kick in a little bit of Amazon as well. You get the idea. Those names in positive territory. What was not in positive territory and part of what was that heavy selling, you had names like Boeing, you had Meta, you had Charter, you had those beta energy names as well. You know, you throw in a Baker Hughes or a Halliburton, you had Dish Network, you get the idea. It was primarily a market that was getting hit to the downside, with a few out there that were fighting against that yesterday. Today, big different story. Started off very strong early on, up over about, call it 250 points on the Dow, about 160 points on the NASDAQ. That even increased very early on, call it the first half hour of the day. We were up over 300 plus points to the upside for the Dow, up over 200 points for the NASDAQ. Things were looking good. And in a flash, 10 minutes later, boom, we're down, we're up 140, up 115. We did bounce back off of that. Gives you a little bit of an idea, up 230 points right before I came on here, up about 150 points for the NASDAQ. But that gives you an idea when we talk about volatility, we talk about these up and down moves. And a lot of people will say, well, you don't get as much volatility in these up moves. Well, there is some truth to that, because there is the fear factor that does get put in there as well. But the reality is these are extreme volatile markets, even and especially with these moves that are these big bounce back moves that have a hard time sustaining. And then we see some of the shifts. I'm going to tell you exactly why it shifted the way it did in just a second when we highlight some of these sectors. Before we get there, crude still sitting around 78. You've got the 2-year, of course, right around 4.3, but it's the 10-year today that we mostly focus on anyway, but that really does stand out. A 3.95. We started off at 3.88. Next thing you know, first hour or so into the day, about a 3.95. We are getting ever so close to that 4% level. You've got volatility still holding about 31. You've got the VXN around 35 or 36. Came in a little bit because of the move that we are seeing in the NASDAQ right now. Bitcoin was above 20,000 last I looked. That can change in a heartbeat. Every single sector in the green. But here's what you've got to know and why we were seeing some of that shift in that first part of that half hour that we got from the top of the hour up to this point of the take. So consumer discretion was up well over 2% early on. It pulled back. It was up 1.5%. You had technology up nearly 2%, pulled back up 1.25%. You had materials up about 1.7%. That pulled back down. It's still up. It's up 1.1%, but you get the theme here. What was really strong is giving up some of that. What was really the reason for some of the movement that we are seeing, though, is energy started out up 1%. Last I looked, we were up nearly 3%. So it gives you a bit of an idea of where some of the movement is. As we were pulling to the downside, all those different sectors were pulling to the downside. But then that energy flip kind of gave a little bit of fuel back into the markets, at least to some degree. What's really working right now today? Well, those cruise ship names is one of the areas. You've got Norwegian, you've got Royal, you've got Carnival, all those names. You've got those other ones out there like a CF, a Mosaic. You're looking into that sector as well. You've also got airlines. Throw in an American Airlines. Started off the day pretty nicely. We also have Tesla. We also have Lucid and a big bulk of names within the electronic vehicle world definitely showing up at least early. We'll see if that's sustainable as well. McDonald's getting hit a little bit. I'm also looking at a Keurig Dr. Pepper getting hit a little bit. Philip Morris getting hit a little bit. So you get a little bit, but it's mostly everything still in the green. It was just a pullback from most of the sectors, and that big rocket ship that we're seeing out of energy from the start of the day into this first hour. A lot can change from here. Now, we do have a great webinar after the market close today. It's going to be great. Big round table. It's going to be right at the market close. You've got Ryan, you've got Wayne, you've got the entire team is going to be on board and looking at what's going on within the markets and how that Fed fallout is really, changing things within the market itself. And that's something that everybody's got a lot of opinions on. We're going to be looking at the charts. We're going to be looking at options. We're going to look at everything that's going into this whole thing. And of course, looking very closely at those rates as well, as we've watched that steady move to the upside with not too many hiccups, just continuing that drive to the upper right side. It's definitely something that we'll be hitting on that as well. That is right at the market close. You can sign up for that. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of great knowledge there as well. Got one unusual for you. Charge point. Stock is trading a little bit over 15. Call it 15 and a quarter or so. We are seeing a lot of activity, as I already mentioned, in a lot of the EV names already. But this one does stand out. This is the battery side of things. 14,000 of Fridays expiring. So these don't have much to move, but we're talking about the 30th. So Fridays expiring, 16 calls. Just out of the money from where the stock price is right now. I'd call it 15 and a quarter. These are the 16s, 22 cents up to about 43 cents for those options. ChargePoint does not disappoint in terms of all the hits that it makes. Not all of them have been correct, but certainly many of them have. And it's pretty interesting to watch how every single day it feels like ChargePoint and some very sizable trades. Quite honestly, 14,000 is very small for some of the monster trades that we have seen in ChargePoint over the last couple of months. And it does feel like it hits on a very consistent basis. So something to keep an eye on. And that EV space, seeing a lot of activity there as well. A lot of that activity looking very bullish. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you get an opportunity, check into that webinar tonight as well. Have a great day of trading.